diabetes is all about, or the body is all about fuel. If we don't have fuel, we don't go, right? So the body puts an extremely high value on fuel production, conservation, use, and storage. Okay? That's all about what these hormones are that we're going to talk about today are all about. And it's what happens in diabetes that disrupts that makes it a metabolic disease. So high priority, so there's many, many things that affect fuel usage of the body. Many hormones are directed at it, many organs are involved in it, and many neuropeptides are made that then direct other organs to do something about it. It is so much more complex than I understand it, so much more complex than what I will tell you today. However, if you understand these basics, diabetes will make a lot of sense. And then why we treat the disease like we do will make a lot of sense. So this is important information. So the body likes homeostasis. It likes to keep things within a fairly tight range, right? We don't have many things that are just all over the place. The body likes organization. It likes to keep things tight. Blood sugar, very same thing, very tight. People who don't have diabetes keep their blood sugar within a very small range, usually about 70 at the bottom and about 120 to 140 at the top at the most. Okay. So there's two big, you see multiple organs here. You see, what do you see? You tell me. What organs are you? Liver, pancreas, skeletal muscle, adipose tissue. Those are the big ones. And there are two big hormones. There is insulin that rules this side, and there's glucagon, which rules this side. So if you eat, then your blood sugar is going to go up. And insulin then becomes the predominant hormone because it's anabolic. What's anabolic mean? Builds up. Anabolic steroids do what? They bulk you up, okay? So an anabolic hormone builds up. So that is insulin's big job. It is to direct your ability to utilize and to store fuel. And its big impacts are on adipose tissue, liver, and skeletal muscle. Some organs can operate without insulin. Your brain is doing that. Your brain depends solely on glucose, well, mostly, except for ketones. But for the most part, your brain relies just on sugar. It has to have a constant source. If you don't eat, what happens? Can you think? Why do we feed kids at school if if we're unsure they have food at home? So they can think. If your brain does not get glucose, you cannot think. It runs on a saturated system all the time. If you get down to below saturation, you can't think. You look like you're drunk. People get arrested and thrown in jail because of it. So some organs independent, but these are the big ones that are dependent on insulin to produce an action that will allow them either to use fuel or store fuel. As blood sugars go down, after you've eaten and you don't eat for a while or overnight, then insulin diminishes because you can't keep driving blood sugar down, and glucagon becomes the big dog. And glucagon works on the liver to release stored fuel so that you can keep your blood sugar within this narrow range all the time. It's magnificent. One thing you should probably write down, everybody outside the United States uses millimoles for sugar. 4 to 6 millimoles is normal in this country. 1 millimole of glucose is equal to 18 milligrams per deciliter. 1 millimole, 18. So what does that 4 to 6 convert to? 4 times 18 is 72. Okay. 6 times So remember that conversion, 1 to 18. Okay. And you see on that page that the 4 organs important in metabolic regulation are the liver, the muscle, kidneys, and adipose tissue. All right. So carbohydrate metabolism on the top of page 3. Glucose is prime. It's Maximus prime. Okay. So it gets to be the it is the fuel of choice. Is glucose. What do we do with glucose? What's the body do with it? Does what? We make ATP. And what are some of those systems that we use to do that? Glycolysis, and that goes through what cycles? TCA cycle, Krebs cycle, produces ATP, and ATP can be used by the cell to do its job. So a cardiac cell can beat, a muscle cell can move, a brain cell can think, stomach muscle can digest. Okay. So it's what allows us to keep going. We run out of fuel, eventually we die. So very important. So glucose can provide immediate needs after you eat. You can get immediate needs met. But 2 primary places where we store it is, one is the liver, and that is stored as glycogen. Okay. So there's here's what glycogen looks like. Okay, and then we can also store in adipose tissue, right? So glycogen. How do you do this?
Do you have a USB in?
I do.
Do you need it in?
Yep, it's running this.
Just mute the screen. These are IT people.
Okay, so liver can store glycogen, muscles store glycogen, but muscles, when they store glycogen, they only use it for their own use. They can't provide you glucose as a breakdown of glycogen. Liver is big in storing glycogen. So in between meals, the way you keep your blood sugar in a normal range is you break down the glycogen in the liver and you put it into the circulation. We'll hit this again as we go through. We're going to say things about 3 times as we go through. Adipose tissue is unlimited. You've got huge storage of energy in adipose tissue, which can be readily available, but it usually isn't the first thing we go to. Protein metabolism. So with proteins, amino acids can be taken up by muscle cells in the presence of insulin. Amino acids become an alternate source of fuel if you run low on glucose, because we can convert some amino acids into glucose. The liver can do that. There are about 13, so how many amino acids are there? 20. 13 of them are what we call glucogenic, which means the liver can take them and convert them into sugar. This becomes really important in type 1 because when they can't produce any insulin, they will tear down whatever stores they have to make sugar, and one of them is muscle. The muscles can't excrete a nitrogen load. So the way they do it is they produce pyruvate and they can release amino acids. The preferred one is alanine. So when pyruvate is released and alanine is released, then muscles can get rid of nitrogen. The liver will pick them up and make them into sugar and excrete the rest of it as your urea nitrogen. So it all works. We'll say this again. Fat metabolism. So fatty acids, fats don't go to make sugars. But glucose can go to make fatty acids. Or in combination with fatty acids can make triglycerides, which can then be stored away. Under the presence of insulin, that is a building up process. So you make fat when insulin is present. Again, this will be important when we get to diabetes that is out of control, because the body will break down all that fat very quickly in order to supply fuel for the body. Fat isn't metabolized to sugars, it is metabolized, one of the big things it's metabolized into is ketone bodies. So they're listed there for you. There's three major ones. Acetone is one. You've smelled it before. Anybody who grew up in the country with apple trees? Okay. When apple trees fall on the ground and they sit there for a while, what happens? Oh, they get musky smell. Don't they? Deep, fruity smell? That's acetone. When you get it, you'll sometimes smell it on the breath of patients who are at out of control blood sugar. So acetone, acetoacetic acid, and hydroxybutyric acid. Those are the three ketone bodies. So this is a rendering this is a book from that Joslin Diabetes Center came out with a long time ago. I like their little drawings. So this one shows carbohydrate digestion. So carbohydrate being broken down into glucose. The strongest mover or the stimulus for insulin release is glucose. Okay? So when glucose levels start getting absorbed and coming into the bloodstream, insulin will be released from the pancreas and they will travel together. If you think of the vasculature being a highway, sugar and insulin will move together and they'll go to these different organs. Liver, muscle, fat. Insulin will help them gain entrance into those organs. So insulin will help glucose be taken up by the liver and stored as glycogen. It'll help glucose being taken up by the muscle. It'll be stored as glycogen. It'll help sugar be taken up by fat, and eventually it'll be converted into triglycerides. All building up, this is all storage. So it doesn't really address taking it up and utilizing it right away as fuel, which we'll talk about later. Again, we've got metabolism of glucose, convert into glycogen. When we convert it into pyruvate and acetyl-CoA, we get fat. The liver does that. That's its job. Or we can burn it and get energy. And there's Krebs cycle. You thought you could leave it behind and forget it, and here it is right again. Huge amount of ATP that we can get out of burning glucose. Here's the metabolism of proteins. Amino acids proteins are broken down, and they're broken down into those amino acids. The amino acids get absorbed out of the GI tract and they enter in. They are also a stimulus for insulin release. Sugar levels will not go up, glucose levels don't go up, but insulin gets released. And insulin will move along with them, and in the presence of insulin, muscle will take up amino acids, and so will the liver. That doesn't do anything. Fat. Fat gets broken down to, how do we package fat out of the intestines? What do we? Chylomicrons, remember that? Go pull your lipid lecture out. So chylomicrons goes to the liver. The liver makes all kinds of those VLDL, LDL out of them, right? Puts them back into the bloodstream. They have jobs to do, HDL, triglycerides. So fat in the presence of insulin will get stored as fat and some of the fat released from fat will go to the liver, and the liver will make ketone bodies out of it. And we can use those ketone bodies as a secondary energy source. If they get out of hand, then they cause us trouble. But in small amounts, the brain can use them, other organs can use them for fuel. In terms of the impact of nutrients on blood sugar, carbohydrates always are going to affect blood sugar. So when my little patients come in and they say, I have diabetes, I don't need any sugar, doesn't matter. Your body is very good and very efficient at changing what you eat into carbohydrate, if that's what it needs, glucose. Changing it into glucose. So proteins, about half of the protein we eat, we can convert into glucose. But it doesn't raise our blood sugar as much. Fat, we can't convert much of that into sugar. So carbohydrates, proteins have your biggest impact on blood sugar. Here's a schematic. If you go and eat Chinese food, and you have rice, you have stir-fried meat, and you've got oil that's been stir-fried in, the rice gets broken down and absorbed very quickly. It's like when you drink juice. Juice gets into your system in 10 minutes. That's why we use it to rescue people if the blood sugar gets too low. Okay? So carbohydrates, the body is extremely efficient at breaking them down and getting them into the bloodstream quickly. So they raise blood sugars fast. You've heard about glycemic index. Okay. So some people think by putting a number on and telling you how much impact it has on blood sugar is of value. So carbohydrates, quick in, quick out, right? So you can see why if you eat a bowl of rice in about 2 hours, you're going to have to eat again, usually, because it gets in so quickly. If you just eat an old carb meal. If you add some protein with it, like if you have cereal in the morning, does it stick with you all day? It does not, usually about 2 hours, unless it's got some fiber in it. But if you have eggs and bacon and toast, does that stay with you longer? My father-in-law is a farmer. I never see him eat a bowl of cereal before he goes out to work. He has biscuits, gravy, bacon, eggs, because he can go all morning on it. So protein, you can see it does affect blood sugar, but it's delayed, and it's not to the same extent as you see with the carbohydrates. Fat, very little effect on blood sugar. I wore a CGM one time for 5 days so I could teach myself how to use it. CGMs are continuous glucose monitors. And we can put them on patients and have it'll collect data for us forever how long we leave it in there, and then we can take it off and it will draw us pictures of what their blood sugars did for those days that they wore it. So when I wore it, I picked a different, I think I've told you this before, I picked a different diet every day. So one day I ate Atkins. On that day, my blood sugar was flat. It never budged. Now, the day I ate chocolate, one day I ate chocolate. So fat, very little effect. So we like people to have a mix of macronutrients because one, it sustains them from meal to meal, and the other is that we can alter the impact of the meal contents on their blood sugar. Okay? So dietitians are really good at helping people construct how to use this to know how to dose their insulin. Like if you eat a piece of pizza, that fat does a lot of work up front that keeps you from absorbing all that carbohydrate. So you get a little bit of a rise from the crust in the blood sugar, and then several hours later you get this another rise because the fat really slows down that digestion and absorption. So when people are heavily regulating their blood sugar with exogenous insulin, they have to know this stuff. And dietitians can help them a lot in learning how to make a meal and then how to respond to a meal that they've eaten with insulin. Okay. Hormonal control of homeostasis, that's the bottom of page 3. Insulin is the most important regulator of nutrient homeostasis. But it has some balance. Because if it didn't have a balance, it would all go to its head and we'd be up on the floor with low blood sugars. So it has things that counterbalance or counter-regulate it. And those are listed there for you on the next page that I'm skipping. So normal plasma glucose concentration, you must know these, dead cold. So a normal, and this is in somebody who doesn't have diabetes, normal fasting blood sugar. So a fast is usually defined as after 8 hours. That means no soda, no popping a cough drop in your mouth, no taking a swig of orange juice as you go out the door, no loading up your coffee with creamer. So no calories, 8 hours. Blood sugar should be in the 70 to 99 milligrams per deciliter range. That's normal. After you eat, your blood sugar does go up some, but it is blunted by the fact that you can produce insulin. If you don't have diabetes, it doesn't matter if you eat carrots or pecan pies, it doesn't matter, or have a Slurpee from Brahms. None of that matters, because you can put out as much insulin as needed to keep that sugar in that range. So rarely, eat a donut, your blood sugar doesn't go over 120, 140. That's important because we're going to see when we get to diabetes is that postprandial rise is really out of control. So make a note beside it. I know you'll be asked of it a million times. Okay, insulin counter-regulatory hormones. There are 4 of them. There's glucagon. It is the major counterweight to insulin. It does everything opposite that insulin does. It's produced by the alpha cells of the pancreas. And it is what is predominant right now. If you aren't sitting there eating or drinking anything with sugar, glucagon is the predominant hormone right now, keeping you upright and your brain functioning, because it keeps the glucose going. Main target is the liver. It makes the liver break down glucose and put it into your bloodstream. Epinephrine is more of an emergency hormone. If you have to run away from a lion or a tiger, epinephrine can work very fast on the liver and make you release lots of sugar quickly. So if you get scared, if you are stressed out of your gourd all the time, then your sugar will be up. And it'll be due to the stress hormones, usually epinephrine. Cortisol and growth hormone come into play, but not as often. But they are also counter-regulatory hormones. So we talk about the target tissues of insulin. You've got to know these. Because in the pathogenesis of acute diabetes, this is what comes into play. The liver, the adipose tissue, the brain, and the muscle. But it's those 3 that are most common. Okay? This is where insulin has its activity. So once insulin is released, it's released into the portal circulation. Where does the portal vein go? The liver. The first place that sees insulin when it's released is the liver. After a meal, about 2/3 of it gets taken up by the liver. After the brain is also taking things out all the time. The reason why the first place the insulin goes is the liver is because it has to tell it, stop putting glucose into the blood sugar, get ready for food, it is coming. Okay? We have anticipatory insulin release. It's called cephalic. So when you are ready for a meal, your body gets all geared up for it. You're either anticipating that you're going to get to eat something really good, Or you always eat at a certain time, so your brain's like, okay, it's 11:45, she always eats at 12, get ready. So insulin gets released, anticipatory insulin. So that first phase of insulin goes to the liver and says, stop, stop, she's gonna eat. And so the liver has been breaking down glycogen and putting glucose into the system. So we have to shift machinery, we have to do a 180, we've got to turn this big ship around and make it go that way. Okay? So we've got to get it to stop making glucose, putting glucose into the system, and get ready to take up glucose and put it away as glycogen. Extremely, mark by that. It is a huge, huge pathology in type 2 diabetes. And it's one of the places that we put a drug, that we can use a drug, metformin. Okay. So I feel like a preacher right here. So, really, really important. Let me say it again. With the first thing that insulin does, released into the portal vein, it goes to the liver. It shuts down and stops glucose being added in. You don't need any. You're going to get all this sugar from a meal. You do not need to keep putting it in. But you got to replace what you used up in the time that you weren't eating. Okay? Extremely important. That's the first phase of insulin release. Okay? So what does insulin do? If you go down to, well, the liver has the ability to store about 100 grams of glycogen. So it can store away about 400 calories. On a good run, you could probably use up most of that. So we replace that. Anything that's extra, the liver will make into acetyl-CoA, which then eventually will be made into fatty acids and fat. So insulin, look under that, 6, where it says it stimulates, this is important, you have to know these. It stimulates glycogenesis. It stimulates the production and creation of glycogen. It stimulates fatty acid synthesis. Stimulates triglyceride production. It inhibits breaking down glycogen. It inhibits making new glucose. We don't need it. It's coming. And ketogenesis, the production of, the breakdown of fat, the production of ketone bodies. Okay? Very important. You have to know those things. They will come back and we're going to see them over and over again. During fasting states, when insulin levels are low, the liver releases glucose from the glycogen to maintain blood glucose within normal limits. Extremely important. That's how you survive. Okay. So the liver can make new glucose. And when you get into insulin deficiencies, when there's nothing telling it what to do, it'll make new glucose because the other tissues are breaking down. They're sending all these substrates to the liver, and the liver takes them, pyruvate, amino acids, makes new glucose. The fats break down triglycerides. They got glycerol. They send them to the liver goes, I'll make new glucose out of it. Okay? So insulin, in the presence of insulin, we don't do that. So it's one of the reasons why we replace insulin. We can make that stop. Okay? So down there, that picture at the bottom shows you the kind of the intimate relationship between the liver and the muscle. So the liver puts out glucose, muscle takes it up, creates waste products of pyruvate, or lactate and amino acids, puts them into the bloodstream, the liver picks them up, makes new glucose out of it. Next page, topic 5. In the muscle. In the presence of insulin at the muscle, sugar gets taken up so it can store it away as glycogen, and amino acids get taken up so you can make new proteins, so protein synthesis. The muscle, because it's such a big organ, can store lots of glycogen. It can store 500 or 600 grams. The only problem with that is that it is not available. The muscle cannot break down glycogen and put glucose into your bloodstream. So it's of no source to us once it's there. It's only there, it helps the muscles do their work, but it doesn't help anything else. Whereas the liver just freely gives. Adipose tissues store triglycerides, huge amount. In a 70-kilogram man, he stores about 30 pounds as fat. 100,000 kilocalories. You know how long you can live off that? So if I eat 12 or 1,500 kilocalories a day, how long can I live? Go a long time. Okay, so it's a big reserve. In the presence of insulin, you make fat, lipogenesis. So insulin inhibits lipolysis, keeps you from breaking down that fat. Next page. So we're going to summarize and we're going to hit this again. Page 6. After eating a meal, there's a decrease in added glucose. Because insulin has come out and said, it's time to take up glucose. Increase in the uptake of glucose by the liver and the muscle, which is converted into glycogen. Anabolic process. There's a decrease in lipolysis, or breaking fat down, and an increase in making new fat. There's an increase in amino acid uptake by the muscles, which leads to increase in protein synthesis. Anabolic activity everywhere, abounding. Everything is abundant. We're putting it away for the time when we might be starving. There's a decrease in counter-regulatory hormones. So if insulin starts going up, glucagon goes down, don't need epinephrine or cortisol or very much growth hormone at all. In the center there, it shows you on the right-hand side, the green, when you look at it in color, those are all the things that insulin is doing. And on the left-hand side, where it says stop, those are all the things that insulin is inhibiting. So it's inhibiting the new production of glucose. It's inhibiting glycogen being broken down, inhibiting fat being broken down, inhibiting ketones being produced. It's inhibiting the breakdown of muscle. Guess what? When insulin goes away, all of those things happen. And so that's where all the symptoms and all the problems come in when we get to diabetes. During a fast, in between meals at the bottom. In a fast, glucose concentrations fall down, insulin levels go down, glucagon comes up. The liver is its target because that's where the glucagon is. I mean, the glycogen. We use, if people's blood sugars get too low, we can inject them with glucagon to try to get their blood sugar to come up. So we'll use that as a rescue for some people. Glucagon promotes the availability of energy in the form of glucose and ketones. Liver breaks down stores of glycogen, so glycogenolysis under the influence of glucagon makes new glucose. Liver makes new glucose from proteins coming from amino acids coming from muscle, or glycerol coming from fat. Okay. Makes sense? Okay. You nail that down, and tomorrow we'll sail through peptides. Okay, let's take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll go back over insulin biosynthesis and secretion. So come back in about 10 minutes.